Good evening. It's Joyful Hermit, and I just wanted to. I had done a video earlier today, and the first one just went on too much and whatever. I didn't like how it was, and then I erased that one or deleted that one. Then I did another. It was much shorter, but Lovey started carrying on. He's gotten a little bit fussy or controlling, demanding. And so I took that one off. But another reason is that it was something that another person had sort of responded to something I was sharing to her about my own life and also what I had explained to my grandson about how I had a deep, deep sense years ago, 42 years ago, of something very deeply ingrained. It just came to me, that kind of thing that I remember where I was sitting in an office at a district office where I was an assistant um, um, projects director. And I'd had a miscarriage several months before, but I knew within that there was another soul that God had, that God was telling me wanted to be born and was waiting to be born to me and my husband. And things weren't going that well in the marriage. I had buried a lot of that. Um, and he said he was going to be different or something after the miscarriage, and it didn't really matter. He couldn't be different. He wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to change his ways or his whatever. But um, that wasn't really the point of any of it. It was what God was telling me, that there was this other soul waiting to be born. And so I was explaining that to my grandson, and I was explaining it to this friend who was very devout person, but it didn't settle well with her. I think um, I don't know what you would call it, maybe rigid, more of a rigid belief system or something. But um, the baby was born. Little soul was born in a body. That was our third and final child. Our fourth child, the third one died. And I even had this sense of how that soul wasn't ready, wasn't was taken away from this earth. The miscarriage, the one that died at 3 months in utero. And I don't know, I guess I just understood this so well. And that baby is waiting, that little soul is waiting, is waiting for me on the other side in heaven. I was able to hold the baby briefly. An angel came and brought me the baby. When the baby appeared in a dream with this angelic, it was an angel, but it looked like a nurse to me in the dream, lucid dream. Years later it was. Um, and I thought at first, well, that was the baby that I knew. But no, I thought that doesn't look like the little boy I did have. And I realized that was the baby who didn't live. And it was about 18 months old. I was allowed to hold the baby for a short while. And then this angel came and took the baby, said, I have to take the baby back. The baby will be waiting for you. Later on, we'll be waiting for you. And so it helped me understand more of how God allows us to cooperate, just like with my death experience. God asked me if I wanted to go on with him or go back. Asked me twice, because the first time I immediately wanted to go on with him. I had died, excuse me. And I wanted to go on. It was so wonderful. Death was so easy. I had no other thoughts than to go on with God, with all that love, with God who is love. And so then God showed me my little children happily playing with my parents at their lake cottage, where I'd sent them while I had the surgery, but had died. Then he showed me my ex-husband's face, the children's father, in a terrible temper, in a rage. His face was all beet red and puffed up, just his head. A terrible view of how he could get into a temper. And still I couldn't say I would go back to earth. But I did feel it in my heart, like, oh my, these children would be living with someone with that kind of a temper. But the best I could do, and it ended up being the best, was telling God, I will do whatever you want me to do. Basically, whatever your will is for me, God, I will do. He immediately said, I'm sending you back, rear your children, and fulfill your mission. So, that type of loving consideration of us, years before that, it would have been maybe 87. Well, it would have been maybe 4 or 5 years prior, 5 years at least, that I had the miscarriage, and that this understanding of how God considers souls and has their souls waiting and wanting to be born. And he considers where those souls are, who they're going to be born to, under what circumstances. And I understood more that the baby who died in utero at about 3 months old, I always had this tremendous sense that God and the baby, the soul, had decided that time was not good and not to go to earth, not to go into life, but to be pulled from life. The baby was alive, but to be pulled out of the situation it was going to be born in. I don't know if that means that that God and the soul in the embryo within me determined, collaborative, wasn't going to go through with that birth, with that continue to live for another 6 months and be born. But I did sense that it had either God or the soul or both collaborative. That God knew that the timing, and that God wanted to try to reach my ex-husband, my husband at the time, that the opportunity to give him a chance to turn around and change his life and how he was treating me and our 2 daughters that we already had. And that's what happened with the miscarriage afterwards. He told me, had tears in his eyes. He didn't say what he'd done. I suspected, but I immediately buried it, because that's what I did, and I probably still tend to do that less and less as I spiritually progress. That was a flaw in me, that I would bury things that was too painful for me to keep in my conscious mind. And that's how I went on with the marriage like that longer. But what if he had converted into being a new being, a better husband, a better father? Because that's what he said he was going to be. But he couldn't keep it up for long. It wasn't long. And, but I felt that was the situation. Then, this would have been in fall of 1995. Well, I won't get into that yet. But then there was the situation, maybe 6 months later, and my husband had already said some things and done some things. But for a short while, he had tried to be better, very short while. But then came that sensation deep within, vivid to me now, where I was sitting in front of this typewriter in this assistant in my office in this school district where I was assistant projects director. This inner knowing that there was another soul waiting to be born to us. And at that time, I did think that things were going to, I had duped myself. However, the next summer that came with me, I told my husband that there was another soul. I knew it. Back then, I thought that everyone sensed things like that and understood it, and that it was serious, and that so, but he, of course, a man, as Dr. H says, sometimes they don't think like women think. But I remember when I conceived for this final child that we had, and I never felt that way again, that there was another soul waiting to be born to us. So we had this lovely little baby boy, and the husband left after he was born. It was maybe 2 months later that he went on to this new job, and said, "You stay and with the house and until it sells, that kind of thing, and continue with your." I was in a job as a media center director then, and he says, "I'll see how this works out," and all, and I went along with that. What am I going to do? I had a support group, um, and I had buried anything that could go wrong. I had this sense that things would work out. And I was also eager to move to this area where he had this job. It'd be very close to USC, and it would be very good for my own career and for the daughters. Excellent schools that they were in then, excellent elementary school the girls were in. And so, and I didn't work the first semester because I was taking the courses, and we'd had the accident, and I hadn't gotten a job yet in administration. I've mentioned this before, the second semester after that accident, but he was already leaving then. So the marriage was definitely on the rocks. But this baby, our the baby that lived, our little boy, was really only around his father 2 months, from 1 to 2 months old, and then from about 11 months to 16 months. And then he started leaving, that, wasn't wanting to be married anymore after the accident. So not very long. But as time has gone on, and the son he's 40 now, but I didn't realize, I did know that he'd gotten closer to his dad as an adult. I didn't realize to the extent. And he's cut away from me and has decided that I had lied to him about his father. He always, though, was very wanting a dad. But still, that was the soul that was waiting to be born. And I still prayed, was very spiritual as a child, a very wonderful child, and delightful and very sincere, and great sense of humor, but also serious about God. And he loved Catholicism when he was in it, when he was going to church. And he liked going to church. And as a little toddler and preschooler, he was very sensitive to God, aware, very aware. So I still have trust that he will come back, although I have been shown things of his soul as an adult and after college, and then a few years later, that wasn't good at all. So I need to keep praying for that. But my videos were sort of on the line of this person who I was explaining this to, And I explained it to my grandson that his soul was ready to be born, and God placed them through with however it worked out. If it's sort of like it is when you are dying, if it's an accident or something, with people with death experiences, they're often asked, do you want to come on with me or do you want to go back? Or they're sent back or taken on. So it's a communication that goes on with God and the soul. And much as we, throughout our spiritual progression in this life, do well to give ourselves over to God increasingly, give our free will back to God if we are so inclined. Even though, of course, as humans, we still cling to things. We do, but at least it's a sincere gesture on our part if we really do mean it. And that's how God got me out of a very bad situation and knew that I was ready when I said, do with me what you will. I can tell my life isn't going in the direction you want it, God. Do with me what you will. And I didn't necessarily mean in the marriage, although that was part of it. I meant even in my career. All of a sudden I thought, what am I doing? I'm finishing up this doctorate, and I wasn't sensing within that that's really what God had me on earth to do. And of course, being a mother was my first priority, and love. And He allowed me to have children. So there's a communication that goes on with our soul and with God. And it can be something that we recognize or something that that's going on subconsciously. So I'd explained to my grandson this, that with his parents divorcing, that his parents very much were in love when they married, and for quite some time. They weren't soulmates. The marriage had broken apart quite a while ago. Well, he was concerned about something regarding that, and thinking that something that had happened more recently was the cause of it. Even though I found out his mother had explained otherwise, but not with enough detail for him to really believe it. He still had these niggling doubts of it being a different reason why the marriage broke apart. But no, it had been long before that, of two people who essentially were in love when they got married, and but they weren't soulmates. They were very mismatched, and it became a very controlling situation of one person over the other, and fear involved, fear in getting out of it sooner. But this baby was born, and the mother very much wanted to have a baby, very much. The father, but loves him, of course, when the baby was born, and later on, especially within the last couple of years, has gotten involved with the son, which is wonderful, wonderful, and loves that boy very much. So that was all part of that couple's evolution with their souls, each person as individuals and together. But so I told my grandson this, that his soul, that God had his soul born into his body, into his parents' family, into this family unit that was created, and that it was meant, and that all of his life is his legacy now. How is he going to deal with things in life, and deal with this, with the divorce, or with the concern he had, which would have probably put blame on one of his parents over the other, and it just wasn't the case. It was a mutual falling apart, and a situation of unhealthy, very unhealthy but he didn't know he grew up in that. But that's his legacy. And I explained to him my three and the one soul that wasn't born, but lived 3 months within me, but was alive. But that the ones that did live it, this is their legacy of having a mother with suffering and how it affected them as adults and how they need to have their freedom. I was explaining that to him also because his mother's one of them that needs to have this freedom. And but to make contact if there's a need. That's pretty much how it is. And God has helped me understand that now, recently, with all of them. And God has reminded me that that my soul has a purpose and a job to do here on earth still. Or I would have gone before. He would have taken me before, such as when I had the head injury over 5 years ago. Neurosurgeons said, miracle, miracle, you're alive. Miracle, your neck wasn't broken or your back, killed instantly. I should have been by rights. Didn't have a broken bone. I had a cracked molar is all. Didn't even find that out for about another half a year. So, I've had situations where I should have been dead. Well, the death experience I did have, but since then, since I reared my children, where it was a miracle I lived. So God has something. So for all of you, if you're still alive listening, you have a purpose yet, very definitely. And I believe from what I have sensed deep within, innate spiritual knowing is what I call it. But I don't know if it's theologically sound or not. And that's what this friend of mine reacted when I was explaining this to her, how it is with souls and how God places them where they're meant to be, irregardless. And I even think that the soul, before it enters into the body that it's going to be in during this lifetime, our souls, that we are aware, we are shown. Just like when I was dead, I was shown what was what with the husband and anger and the children. It wasn't that I wasn't shown what would be if I didn't go back. There was a communication going on. God wanted me to know and to realize, my decision would be affecting these three children. He didn't show me the husband in a normal face. It was this rage, his temper. So, but and then I my best I could do is I'll do whatever you want. And that really is our best to say to God. And maybe our souls have said that to God. Do with me as you will. And then God puts us in where he had planned to, in whatever mother with a father, whether our God, who is all-knowing, maybe knows that the parents are going to die, or one of them, or the child will go through great hardship in an orphanage, or be abused by a stepfather or a stepmother. I'm not sure, but I think that there is an understanding, but the soul becomes unaware when it's born and goes through life. Unless some people, though, I think do sense that thing of I've known this, or I understand, or I have some kind of a connection. Some people are sensitive like that, but that's just something that I think occurs. Just as, and I'll say one more thing about something that I know, and that God gave me more of a proof of it because it was in the temporal in 1995, fall of 1995. But on this other part of our souls and God placing us, and of it being our legacy then to live and to do what we can in our lives with what circumstances we were born into and that we likely agreed to, or at least were willing to say, God, I'll do whatever you will. And then we enter into a situation on earth, and it's up to us in our spiritual progression to, as our part of our legacy of our souls, to live as best we can under whatever circumstance, and to not let what the circumstance was dictate how we are going to be as souls in our bodies on earth. Not letting troubles of parents or a divorce destroy us to the point where we don't fulfill our mission on earth, or we fall apart, or if we do fall apart, that we get help and overcome. Or if we're born with congenital defects or cerebral palsy, that's our legacy, and we work through that. Or if we are born and then have childhood cancer, and what, it's our legacy, and that's part of a child's purpose and mission. Because again, God does not view suffering and death as we do, or as we have been taught to view it, as something that immediately must be, that's terrible, terrible. Soul-wise and spiritual-wise, there is so much more than the temporal suffering, death, or whatever, or hardships. It's how our souls live with that and perform under those circumstances, to what depths, heights, and breadths we go with God, to be beings that supersede the temporal challenges. And that's a reminder. That was the same thing that the one person was reminding me of, is stop repeating and imprinting verbally or even mentally how sick I felt. It was only grinding it in me, and it was also taking me away from the power and good and the legacy that my suffering is, the legacy of my life as someone who suffers, as a victim soul of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. I've agreed to that. I've agreed subconsciously and even consciously. I had agreed to it. An angel reminded me, again back in 1995, fall of 95, reminded me, you have agreed to this. It was in a dream. I was having terrible spinal headaches, and was told that you agreed to this, because I was complaining, it hurts, Angel appeared, you have agreed to this. And I had that sense then that I had agreed way back, before, agreed to my whole life in whatever way it was going to unfold. Not necessarily in every detail. Just as when I was sent back into my body, I wasn't reminded that I would be going back into a tremendously pained body, or that I would be going back and lose my career and not have the income that my children would have had otherwise, and a lot of struggles, and lose my health insurance, and etc. I didn't have money to pay for the school district insurance. That was all I could get, either get that or refuse it. I didn't have an extra, I don't know, it was $600, $700 a month when my income was so low. I couldn't afford it. So, and God took care of me though all those years. It was like a week after I got Medicare finally at 65, which I have to pay out of pocket for, but I started having things happen that I would have been wiped out without Medicare. So God took care of it, and He let me know that He had, because He allowed other things to happen to show me, wow, the timing of this was uncanny. That I had to go to ER with an infected uh, thumb. Thought that I had sepsis from a plant splinter in my thumb. Um, I forget what happened next. One thing after another, anyway. Oh, um, well, anyway, I won't get off track on that. But this friend I was explaining these things to, her reaction was that of, oh, brother, oh, brother, how wrong are you? How heretical. It was like it was horrible, horrible thought. So my video had been asking if any of you out there have had this understanding from within or have read it anywhere, or is it some kind of a heresy, or is there some dogma, religious dogma that says that this would be wrong, this way of our souls being placed, and irregardless of how it was going to work out, um, because Jesus himself says, in the case of infidelity, divorce is adultery, infidelity, unfaithfulness. A husband has, and now a wife too, a right to have a bill of divorce. But infidelity, adulteration is being false and of being something that you're not, to adulterate and to cause harm as a result. And that's basically what someone does if they court someone and act as if they are very social or are lying, but you have no clue that they're lying. It's a fraud. And that's an infidelity. So it's not just sexual infidelity, but it could be adultery of other levels, misrepresentation. So, anyway, and this last bit was in fall of 1995. Both of my daughters were off to college, and the one, unfortunately, I had really made an error in trusting a top-notch university, that they had this early enrollment program, and was told that she was admitted. And then time passed and time passed. We didn't hear. Finally, I got a hold of somebody else who said, no, that's not true. We canceled that program for this year. No one told us. So there was this daughter who had graduated from high school early to go to this great university. And we were scrambling to find a school for her. She ended up going where her sister went. They took her. And it was a top-notch school, sort of the Ivy League of the Midwest. And it was a miracle, and by their kindness, that they took her like 2 or 3 weeks before school started. Um, had her come, looked at her records, and yes, and her sister went there. They knew her sister did well, but it wouldn't have been the school that daughter would have chosen otherwise. So I really felt terrible about that. And then I found out later, as when the other daughter was an adult, that she had wanted to transfer to a different school. So I misguided in some ways as a mother. That will be one thing that I ask God to forgive me, and I've asked them, not formally, though I think I need to do that soon, like tomorrow. A text will work, and or maybe I'll wait to see what they're. Maybe the weekend would be better, Sunday or something. They're not in the middle of something with work. Um, and I don't expect any response either. That's the one thing when we ask forgiveness of someone, especially if it's something a long time ago. Um, I don't think it's needed that they say anything back. We may want it. We may think we deserve. Oh wow, thanks for saying that, and I do forget. No, sometimes we just take our consequences. and do what we have to do and let the chips fall where they may. But it was that fall, the daughters were gone. Had my little boy, well, he was 12 then, not so little, getting bigger. And I'd put him in a different school because I'd had a sense about his teacher. And that sense turned out right. He was a molester. Got arrested about 9 months later after I pulled my son out of that class in the school and sent him to a different school. Mainly, though, was my son was being tracked, middle lane tracked in 5th grade to go all through high school. And I knew he had been through so much. I knew he would rise to the occasion with better students rather than being middle laned. And sure enough, that's what he did. He ended up doing very well. So we have to just sort of do our best. In that case, I did okay. I figured it out and got him where he needed to be. But I was so exhausted. And my pain was bad. And I just remember that morning. It was in September, toward the end of September, and I just called out to God and asked God to please let me experience heaven. I wanted to experience a week in heaven, a release from the temporal, and to experience the beauty of heaven for a week. Even I just asked, please let me experience you in heaven, Lord. And he did. So it was about 5 weeks in length. 5 days it lasted. During the Monday through Friday, about when my son was home that next weekend, I wasn't having this experience of being in heaven. And it's hard to describe what heaven was like. But my soul felt refreshed every day. And and it was amazing. And I went, when this first came on me on that Monday morning, I went to this chapel at this convent and knelt before the tabernacle and prayed. And something got to me. And I asked if I would be called by a different name in heaven. And I was told, yes, in heaven, we all are called by a different name. God has a special name for us in heaven. And I dared ask, what is my name going to be? What will you call me in heaven, Lord? And within, I was told my heavenly name. And at first, I thought, wow, what? And I sort of said, well, that sort of sounds like something temporal. I wasn't expecting that name. And God said back, you asked for your name and don't complain. Just like that. And I apologized. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm very grateful for the name. I went home. I looked it up in the dictionary, what the root of it was. And it's a beautiful name. And the name we are given for heaven is also, it indicates what our purpose is and was in life. So there's communication that goes on. And I also then wondered, well, how do I know this? How do I know that I'll have this name in heaven and be called by God by this name that I know what it is, and I don't say what it is. It's the name that God has for me when I'll be in heaven permanently, not the brief time period. I had those 5 days that I experienced heaven while I was on earth in a certain way. I don't know if it was Obviously not the fullness, probably, I don't know. All I know is I experienced another plane of existence, and I was given my heavenly name, and it will be used when I'm in heaven, and it has meaning. So, and I was reminded of that today. It's a what my purpose is, and so I'm going to consider that. I'm going to think about that, and be reminded that that's part of how I'm going to be called in my purpose. And if you look in Revelation 2, I think it's Revelation 2, 2 or 2:11. It's the one where God gives the white stone to the soul, and on the stone is printed their name. That's the chapter they're given the heavenly name. Chapter 2 of Revelation. You'll find it there. And it says something about, that you give it the stone, that the white stone is given, and the name is written on it. The name for that God has given. And I just say, do as you wish, obviously. I would ask God to tell you the name, your heavenly name. Ask Him if you will. And if you're told, if it's something within you and you understand it and it makes sense to you as your heavenly name, look it up, ponder it, pray over it, because chances are the meaning of it is going to be also a clue to your spiritual progression in this life. So anyway, so I had asked people regarding the other thing of our souls and being placed in families, to mothers, to fathers, when they at conception, when God, or whenever God places a soul in us, which I sort of feel is at conception, but I don't know. I don't have a sense of exactly when, but early on. But if any of you have any knowledge or understanding, or have read in theology books, or however, or through an understanding with God, that is a very errant thought or understanding that I have, please leave and comment about it. I don't want to be saying things that are just off the wall and not at all, no founding to it, because I don't want to be deceived on that and be talking about it. It's something, I've just known for decades. It's just normal. Well, that's how it is, but I may be wrong. So if I am, say something and give me the source or the citation, or if you know someone who knows of these things or is very good with religious dogma and doctrine and tenets and things, I'd like to know. I can't think of any other. I guess it's been with me so long, that understanding. And then also, given the heavenly name, and how that name itself is my spiritual progression focus. It's the way I was to and am to live my life on earth and spiritually, temporally and spiritually. The meaning of my name is. So, okay. And this time I didn't have Lovey. He was carrying on in the one that I took down. And that stinker, he was up till 4:30 in the morning yesterday. Something happened with his grooming. He was all wound up. And he just couldn't settle down. I started being concerned that maybe his little pad beans had been cut or something, because she said he kept pulling his paws back. He didn't like to have his front paw, front left paw, and Mercy didn't like her front right paw. And I thought, oh my goodness, he's been cut. She didn't tell me, or but something traumatized him because he was all wild. And now I think it was that they didn't have him go out to the bathroom and he had to hold it too long because he kept wanting to go out too when he barely had to go. And usually he's done by 8 or 9. My babies know all their habits, but at midnight still, and at 1, he didn't go to sleep till 4:30 and kept me and kept Mercy up too. But he's sound asleep now. But earlier today when I did that other video, he was carrying on, and somebody listening who doesn't understand will think, oh, the poor thing, because he is so verbal and makes these noises. He gets real deep and then real high, and then he cries or he moans and anything to get me to get attention. If he wakes up when I'm doing these videos, he just, and if I say his name, Love or Lovey, I don't say that, but he'll catch the love part. He's asleep now, I can say it. But yeah, so anyway, I decided it just wasn't worth people thinking that the dog's abused or in agony there, because he sounds like he's in agony. And then I stop, turn this off, stop talking, and he's immediately quiet. Just, oh, good, she's noticing me. He's so spoiled, his character. God bless his real presence in us, and I just don't want to be saying things that to me seem very obvious and have for years, but that they're somehow wrong, or because my friend really reacted, that it was very errant. She didn't get into it. I could tell she didn't want to get into it with me, but I knew she didn't grasp that at all, and that it was bad. What I was saying was bad and wrong. So if you have that sense or something, then let me know, and where I can find out too more. I guess I can ask God, can't I? If there's some book to go to that would say, or there's like all kinds of dogma and stuff in all the churches. And so, all right, good night. God bless his real presence in us, and let us continue to live our spiritual progression out, understanding that we're still alive. We still have something God wants of us to be doing. And if we can't pinpoint it, and we've asked and we still don't quite know, staying close to him, loving him is always going to be a good thing. Can't go wrong. And talking with God and giving him our time, attention, and love.